The air inside Shadowmire Keep was thick with the scent of salt water and ancient stone, a fragile mix of decay and forgotten magic. The castle itself, half submerged in the emerald tides, was a temporary sanctuary for the last remnants of the Eldoria court. Lady Lysandra arrived just after sundown, her gilded carriage struggling over the damp, uneven causeway. She wore the silks of her rank, but her posture was that of a prisoner, not a sovereign heir. She hated Shadowmire Keep. It was a place of ghosts, of whispered warnings, and of the king's desperate final plans to quell the burgeoning rebellion that threatened to drown their entire realm. Her father, King Aldric, greeted her not with warmth, but with a ceremonial severity. "The Scepter of Seals is here, Lysandra," he stated, his voice booming slightly in the vast, echoing hall. "You are here to guard it, and to prepare for your ascension." The scepter was the key to binding the Seaboard Awards, a final, reckless move to protect their shrinking territories. Lysandra knew its activation required a sacrifice, a binding of royal blood, and she dreaded the coming ceremony. She was assigned quarters in the highest turret, a grand chamber with sweeping, moss-covered windows that looked out over the ceaseless, hungry ocean. It felt like the perfect, beautiful prison. After her small entourage was dismissed, Lysandra dismissed her guards, pleading exhaustion. She needed time alone, not to rest, but to read the encrypted dispatches she had smuggled in her bodice. These were not from allies. They were from the rebels, a group called the Sunken Coil, who claimed the Scepter of Seals would destroy more than it protected. Lysandra was torn, loyal to her blood, yet believing in the rebels' cause for true peace. This night, she had to decide which side of the tide she stood on. It was nearing the third bell of midnight, night 1, when the first crack appeared in her solitude. It wasn't a sound, but a subtle change in the air pressure, the faint metallic temps of unauthorized magic. She spun around, hand already gripping the dagger she kept hidden beneath her pillow. A figure detached itself from the shadows cast by the turret's stone archway. He was clad in sea-dark leather, his face masked by a close-fitting hood, and he moved with the fluid grace of a hunter. This was Rykon, a name whispered with fear and grudging admiration in the Royal Guard barracks, the most elusive agent of the Sunken Coil. His eyes, the only visible feature, were an electrifying, piercing gray that seemed to absorb the dim candlelight. He was inside her chamber, and he was hunting. The Lady Rykon murmured, his voice low and roughened, laced with surprise and an edge of disappointment. "I was told this chamber held the scepter's antechamber." Lysandra held her ground, the dagger steady. "You are mistaken, rebel, and if you take one more step, I will scream and summon the entire contingent." Rykon didn't move. He simply assessed her, his gaze lingering on the nervous tremor in her hand, the determined set of her jaw. "A waste of effort," he replied, a hint of dry amusement entering his tone. "Came for the scepter, not the air. But now that I am here, perhaps I should secure both. The scepter is 2 floors below, guarded by your fear, not your competence." Lysandra shot back, buying time. She had a plan, a desperate, foolish one. She lowered the dagger slightly. "I have the king's cipher. I know how to access the scepter's vault without triggering the proximity ward." Rykon paused, his entire demeanor shifting from hunter to strategist. He didn't trust her, but the information was too crucial to ignore. "Why would the Eldorian lady help the very rebels sworn to depose her house?" he asked, crossing the space between them with alarming speed. He stopped an arm's length away, close enough for her to feel the cool air radiating from his leather armor, the faintest scent of brine and ozone. "Because I believe the scepter will shatter the remaining sea wards, not save them," Lysandra confessed. The words rushed. "It's a suicide pact disguised as a coronation." Rykon searched her eyes. He saw conviction, desperation, and a surprising depth of political pragmatism. He made his choice instantly. "The cipher. Now we have 30 minutes before the Deep Sea Guard rotation reaches this level," he commanded, gesturing to the door. Their alliance, forged in silence and necessity, was immediate. They moved through the labyrinthian, water-stained corridors like 2 halves of a single highly trained shadow. Lysandra used her access codes and her knowledge of the court's superstitious adherence to ritual timings. Rykon used his specialized tools and utter mastery of stealth. They found the vault. It was a circular chamber deep in the castle's core, where the walls were permanently wet and the light filtered green through the ocean's surface above. In the center, suspended on a shimmering column of light, was the Scepter of Seals. It was pure, black obsidian, intricately carved with runes that seemed to drink the light. Rykon reached for his lockpicks, but Lysandra stopped him. The vault doesn't open with physical pressure. It requires the oath of Eldoria, spoken in the ancient tongue. She recited the powerful archaic words she had memorized since childhood, the sacred vow of her lineage. The light column faltered, and the scepter dropped into her awaiting hands. The moment she touched it, a shockwave of cold energy hit them both. The scepter was heavier than it looked, pulsing with a terrible contained power. "It's not just a key," Rykon whispered, his voice hushed. "It's a weapon of mass binding. We must get it out and destroy it." A distant gong, the sound of the deep-sea guards rotating their shift, rattled through the water. Time had run out. Too late, Rykon cursed, shoving Lysandra back toward the shadows. "The alarm is on a sonic delay. They'll be here in 2 minutes." He pushed her into a dusty, disused priest's niche carved into the wall. "Go. Get to the tower. We'll make a diversion." "No," Lysandra insisted, clutching the heavy scepter to her chest. "The guards will expect an intruder, not the lady. I will take it back to my tower, and you will follow." Rykon stared at her, assessing her recklessness, and realizing she was perhaps more dangerous than any soldier he had ever faced. She was a gamble, but a necessary one. He nodded, a sharp, decisive motion, and melted into the wall's shadows as the heavy iron door of the vault groaned open. Lysandra stepped out calmly, holding the scepter with convincing regal authority. "A sonic fluctuation," she told the arriving captain. The scepter required stabilization. The captain, intimidated by her sudden, unexpected presence, stammered an apology. Lysandra simply swept past him, the scepter glowing faintly in her grasp, carrying the rebel's knowledge in her head. She returned to her turret alone, the heavy obsidian scepter resting on her desk. She didn't have long. The second night the court would assemble. Night 2 brought the full weight of the Eldoria court to Shadowmire Keep. Dukes, advisors, and generals filed into the Great Hall, all awaiting the king's final strategy. Lysandra kept the scepter close. She felt its power, a cold, seductive influence that promised absolute control, demanding a price. Rykon returned just before dawn, finding Lysandra waiting by the massive window. He was scraped and bruised, but he carried a crucial piece of data he had lifted from the king's archive. "The prophecy is wrong," Rykon rasped, collapsing onto a velvet settee. "The scepter doesn't seal the wards, drains them, leaving the entire coast vulnerable after 2 days." The realization hit Lysandra like a tidal wave. Our father wasn't saving the realm. He was destroying it in a final, grandiose display of power. "We have to destroy it before the ceremony," Lysandra said, her voice strained. "But how?" "Survive the ages." Rykon explained the archive data. The scepter could only be neutralized by a specific resonance frequency, a sonic vulnerability known only to the original CM ages. "I have a sonic disruptor," Rykon revealed, pulling a small, complicated device from his satchel. "But I need time to attune it to the precise frequency." Their strategy for the day was twofold. Rykon would remain hidden in the turret, calibrating his device, and Lysandra would attend the council to run interference. The council meeting was a suffocating theater of political maneuvering. Lysandra felt the scrutiny of every duke, especially the cunning Lord Corvan, who watched her with a predatory interest. When King Aldrich announced the ceremony for the following night, Lysandra had to interject. "Father, the ritual stone is not prepared," she lied smoothly, her royal training kicking in. "The Elder Scrolls clearly state the Stone of the Deep must be consecrated with an overnight vigil." King Aldrich, stickler for ritual, reluctantly agreed to postpone the ceremony by 24 hours, buying Rykon the time he desperately needed. As dusk settled, Lysandra excused herself, claiming meditation. She returned to her tower, exhausted but triumphant, only to find Rykon in serious trouble. He was slumped over the desk, the sonic disruptor scattered across the mahogany surface. A faint purplish glow emanated from his arm. "The resonance," he grit out, his voice thin with pain. The scepter's proximity guard reacted. "It's draining my energy, binding me to its location." Lysandra ripped a strip of silk from her sleeve and tightly bound the pulsating wound on his forearm. The skin around the injury was cold to the touch. She helped him onto the bed, ignoring the immediate intimacy of the action. This was not a moment for courtly decorum. It was a crisis. "I can't attune the disruptor like this," Rykon confessed, his breath coming in ragged gasps. "The frequency pulses are too erratic. I'm compromised." Lysandra looked at the obsidian scepter, then at the man fighting against its dark influence. She had to take the risk. She sat beside him, their shoulders touching. "Show me the process," she commanded. "I may not have your rebel training, but I have my father's mathematical mind." For the next hour she absorbed Rykon's instruction, learning how to read the complex, wave-like diagrams on the disruptor's screen. Their heads bent close, their hands occasionally brushing over the delicate mechanisms. The physical proximity was an unexpected, intoxicating distraction from the crushing stakes of their mission. Rykon was a rebel, a threat to her crown. Yet his focused intelligence and quiet determination stirred a fierce protective loyalty in her heart. "We are standing on borrowed time, lady," Rykon whispered, turning his head to look at her. His gray eyes were clear, despite the pain. "Then we should use it wisely," Lysandra replied, feeling a reckless, dangerous impulse surge through her. She was royalty, a symbol of order, but Rykon was showing her the freedom of chaos. They shared a single, searing moment, a desperate kiss that tasted of salt, fear, and defiant hope. A promise sealed in the shadows of Shadowmire Keep. She pulled back, her face flushed, and returned to the disruptor with renewed focus. The urgency of their shared secret was overwhelming. By the time the fourth bell rang, Lysandra had finished the attunement. The disruptor was pulsing faintly green, ready. But the closeness had been noted. Lord Corvin, who had lingered in the hall, had seen a shadow move in her window. Night 3 arrived with a storm, the heavy waves crashing against the stone foundation of the castle. Mirroring the chaos about to erupt inside, Lysandra's door was thrown open before dawn. King Aldrich stood there, flanked by 2 imposing guards, his face a mask of furious accusation. "You have compromised the security of the scepter," the king thundered, pointing to the barely visible markings on Rykon's arm, which he had failed to fully conceal. Rykon, recovering but still weak, rose instantly to face the king. He knew the cost of discovery was swift, absolute execution. "He is my shadow courier, father," Lysandra lied. Stepping forward to shield Rykon, he retrieves the ancient artifacts I study. He was injured by the scepter's proximity wards. The king hesitated. He wanted to believe his daughter, but the rebel-like garments Rykon wore were damning evidence. "He will be locked in the eastern cell," King Aldrich declared, his voice tight with suspicion. "You will not see him again until after the ceremony." Rykon gave Lysandra one meaningful look, a silent communication that said, "The disruptor. The ceremony is still on tonight." Lysandra was placed under guard in her own turret, the scepter taken from her. The sense of failure was crushing. She had bought them time, only to lose the battle. But the memory of Rykon's kiss, the taste of rebellion, fueled a final, desperate burst of royal fury. She would not let the realm fall. She used her inherited skill, a small, subtle glamour spell she had practiced in secret, to convince her attendant that she needed a specific ritual oil from the supply room. The attendant, hypnotized by the glamour, unlocked the door. Lysandra raced down the stairs, using the labyrinthine servant tunnels Rykon had taught her. Her target was the eastern cell, located near the lowest tide line, where the prison walls were constantly weeping salt water. She found Rykon slumped in the corner of his small, cold cell. He looked up, his face illuminated by a sliver of moonlight filtering through a high grate. "The disruptor," he breathed. "It's in the stone box under the king's ceremonial throne, hidden by a minor illusion spell. I'm going to set you free, but you must head for the docks immediately," Lysandra ordered. "I will handle the scepter." Using a hairpin and a forgotten technique for bypassing the royal guard's archaic locks, Lysandra opened the heavy cell door. Rykon stood, his movements still strained. He looked at Lysandra, seeing not the princess, but the rebel queen. "We should escape together," he urged. "No," she replied, shaking her head. "If I vanish, the king will activate the scepter instantly. If I stay, I can stop him." She kissed him once more, a quick, fierce promise of a future they might never have. Go, live, and tell the sunken coil that Eldoria is not yet lost. Raikon vanished into the darkness of the lower tunnels. Lysandra raced toward the great hall where the sounds of the king and the court assembling were already echoing. She burst into the hall just as King Aldrich raised the scepter of seals above the ceremonial stone. It pulsed with malevolent, blinding power. Lysandra ran, not to the king, but straight to the throne, ripping the sonic disruptor from its hidden box. The room exploded in light and sound as she activated the device, tuning it to the exact neutralizing frequency. A final act of rebellion against her crown, securing a quick, dangerous escape for Raikon, and a hopeful, uncertain future for her people. We hope you enjoyed 3 Nights in the Sunken Castle. Let us know in the comments if you think Lady Lysandra made the right choice between her crown and her heart. If you loved this tale of royalty, realms, and rebels, please comment, like, share, and subscribe to Storycraft Studio for more high-stakes romantasy adventures.